Hello, folks. Welcome to Mario Zna podcast. Welcome to Serbia, Belgrade. Tonight on the show, for the first time in bunker, uh, somebody that I'm in contact with for a longer time. We had a deal to do a show, but he's just traveling like from Venezuela to Moscow, from Moscow to Iraq. I don't know, like you cannot catch him. Catch him if you can. Tonight on the show is Kristofer Helali. He's a researcher, he's an analyst, he's a journalist, but he is also a head of a communist party, American Communist Party. Christopher, please correct me if I'm wrong. Like, hello and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you. And I'm the international secretary. There's seven of us who are on the executive board of the American Communist Party. Many of you know Jackson Hinkle, my dear brother and comrade, and also Haz al-Din, many others who are with us together. So it's great to be on, and a lot of love to Serbia. I was there few weeks ago. Sadly, we couldn't connect there, but I love Serbia, and we will continue to defend Serbia and its territorial integrity.
Oh man, thank you so much. It means so much from for people when they hear somebody from abroad, especially somebody who is in politics, to say such a thing. But I will leave Serbia for later. One thing that I know is that you are also in your comrades. You're covering the globe. It's not only United States. It's not only the Europe or Russia or China or Africa, but you are covering the world because the world has gotten like in a phase that it's crazy. It's like a circus, especially when it comes to politics. So my first question is for you is when you see today's powers in the world from Russia to United States, China, European Union, if we can call it a power, uh, how do you comment the current relations in the world? How do you analyze it, and what can you say to the people like who are listening? Like, what's the near future of the world when we combine the wars and the diplomacy scandals and everything that is happening?
So, of course, I mean, I think that for those of us who were born at the end of the Cold War or into the 90s and beyond, we grew up in a different kind of world. So, the world I was born into was a bipolar world with a non-aligned movement. So, it had the Soviet Union and the sort of socialist countries. It had the United States and the capitalist countries, and then the non-aligned movement. We remember, of course, Yugoslavia, Egypt, everything like that, trying to be a bridge between the two. You remember that Tito was both a guest in Moscow and Washington at the highest levels. So we had a world that was a little bit more easy to kind of categorize. In the 90s, after the collapse of socialism in the Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, we had a situation where the United States and its partners and allies took control of much of the global power and resources. And of course, we had at that time dissolution not only of socialism in Eastern Europe, but also dissolution of Yugoslavia, massive wars and chaos around the world, first Gulf War. So what we really had is the beginning of a transformation period where the United States seek to create its Pax Americana, seek to create an opportunity where it was now in control, it was now dominating in all aspects, in all regards. And so that lasted for a period, I believe, of about a decade to a decade and a half. But after 9/11, after the so-called war on terror, the United States, in its hubris, launched two major wars and multiple regime change wars. Of course, we remember invasion of Afghanistan and occupation of Afghanistan for nearly 2 decades, Iraq, then of course Libya, and not to mention Syria and so many other places during the so-called Arab Spring. But at that time, the United States committed hundreds of thousands of troops and resources, trillions of dollars. And in the end, what ended up happening was 2 decades of imperial war, and the gain wasn't to the US, it was to Russia and China, India, many other countries that were not using their money for war, but were investing their money in their own development and infrastructure. And so you have a situation where you went from a unipolar world to now what we can properly call an emerging multipolar world or polycentric world, however you want to frame it. But there's no longer the I think the geopolitical architecture for the US to be a sole hegemon anymore. Because Russia now today under how long? Almost 3 decades of Putin leadership is not the Russia of Yeltsin, and Russia of or in China of Xi Jinping is not the China of Jiang Zemin or Hu Jintao, right? It's these countries are much stronger and more capable, and of course, we cannot forget to add that the United States has also been pressuring these major countries on their own borders. And of course, we currently have a special military operation. We currently have the chaos that's erupted since 2014 in Kiev with the fascist junta, and you have Taiwan, you have of course the Korean Peninsula, you have the Middle East, you have Iran, you have of course in Latin America, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua. So what I hope that people can understand is we've gone through a period of tremendous transformation in about 4 decades. Bipolar world, unipolar world, now multipolar world. And in that rapid time period, we've also had tremendous growth, economic transformation, advancements in science and technology. And so the future ultimately, which of course was the crux of the question, what does the future hold? The future holds the opportunity for there to be multiple centers of power and to be a sort of balance like we remember from before the Vienna Convention in Europe. There was always this idea of a balance of power between Russia, Austro-Hungary, the British, the French, the Spanish, whoever it was. In this case, we need a balance of powers today in the world. That's what people like Professor Mersheimer are always advocating for, this kind of a neorealist position where we have a sort of balance of major powers and they're able to have their spheres of influence and, of course, to offset each other's gains with some sort of win-win situation. Now, of course, that can only happen if the United States wants to be a team player. At this point, under this administration, there is no there's no indication that the United States seeks to be a team player, but the United States seeks to continue the path towards dominance like it has done since 1991, 92. And so I think that poses a very big problem because if the United States continues to exert its resources and its military for power, ultimately, I think it will be its own undoing. And I don't think anybody really wants that in the sense that we don't want a major nuclear power to have to undergo a severe internal crisis. We want there to be stability. That's very important for the world's people and for our future as human species. So I think that we are in a profound period of transformation and crisis. And ultimately, it will be the global south. It will be this emerging center of power in Moscow, in Beijing, in Tehran, in Caracas, in New Delhi, in South Africa, wherever it might be. These centers of power are going to need to show the West that it needs to come on board. However, the United States, the European Union continue to pursue their own projects. And ultimately, the confrontation is what we're seeing today in Ukraine. The confrontation is what we're seeing in the Middle East, especially with the ongoing genocide in Gaza. And of course, the confrontation is what we're seeing in the ongoing crisis in the Americas. So it remains to be seen. But ultimately, we are in a period of enormous change, and that change is happening more rapidly every day.
Please, I can't ask you a question because right now you just gave it yourself. Uh, where is Serbia from your point of view, from your stand in that world that you just described? Where can we find Serbia? And please consider that here the political situation and the system is going towards European Union.
Of course, historically, Serbia, or what was then Yugoslavia, it found itself on the important development path towards socialism, but it understood an independent path. It said Yugoslavia, as a union of all of these peoples, needs to pursue a path that is not only independent of Europe and the United States, but also independent of Moscow. Although there were the brotherly ties and the history and the understanding of that history, it really sought to create a new identity of a powerful nation state. After its dissolution, we can really understand Milosevic as the last Tiroist, as the last big leader of that time Yugoslavia. And I think that Milosevic really wanted to preserve the strength and the power and the integrity of Yugoslavia. But of course, Milosevic faced an uphill battle. One, because the West wanted to balkanize and to fragment the powerful nation state, and also a project of historical revisionism. Of course, you see what's happening in Croatia today. This is appalling for the Ustasha and this fascist history to be rehabilitated on a state level is catastrophic, I think. And of course, this shows the bankrupt nature of this so-called European Union and European project, because ultimately they equate fascism and communism, but for them, fascism is better than communism. And it shows this sort of Fourth Reich that many meme about and joke about, but it's actually quite true. Second of all, economically speaking, the dissolution of Yugoslavia led to a deindustrialization of Yugoslavia and now present day Serbia. So that process led to a population beginning to leave for work, profound period of economic crises. And I think that, of course, we cannot talk about Serbia without Republika Srpska, without the situation of Kosovo and Metohija. But with all of that being said, Serbia today, like other countries in the region, tries to balance the interests of both Moscow and Brussels and Washington. The problem with that is that ultimately in this world, for a small country like Serbia, you need to pick a side, or at least you need to have more of a say over your own policy. The problem is Vucic both wants to be friend in Moscow and come to parade, and also go to Brussels and Washington and sign treaties and concessions. But that doesn't solve the terminal crisis within Serbia. Not only the territorial questions, which are, of course, very big and important. And of course, we had the recent statement from the minister, I believe it was for Kosovo, who said that we can make, if we go towards European integration, we can make concessions on Kosovo. This was
And
a big
also,
bombshell.
excuse me, he's a minister of European affairs, and he also stated that if we are closer and closer to European Union, as we are closer and closer, we will consider putting on sanctions towards Russia. But he said after it that he didn't say it that way, but I saw that minister drinking wine with Albin Kurti, for example, the terrorist prime minister. If we, so it's yeah. Please continue, but there is more than more on it than maybe media spread around the world. He said that Serbia will be ready when we feel that we are joining the European Union, that we are close, that we will consider sanctioning Russia.
Of course. And this is so the double problem is in this case, not only the turn against Russia, but also the giving up of Serbia's claims to its historic land in Kosovo and Metohija. Both
Yeah.
those things are really desired by the European Union because the European Union wants Kosovo to be a separate country. Why? America's largest base in the Balkans is there, right? So perfect for it to be a strategic location. Not to mention, Albanian nationalism has a very useful is a very useful tool for the Europeans because Kosovo and Albania, it's not only that Kosovo is used as a bridgehead by the Albanian terrorist forces against Serbia, but also Albania itself is home to various terrorist organizations that are supported by the US against rivals. For example, the Mujahideen Khalq is based in Albania, which of course for many is shocking, but this is a terrorist organization for Iran that, was an Islamic Marxist group that then allied with Saddam Hussein, and then the US and Israel and moved its bases after the war in 2003 from Iraq to Albania. And it's a cult, really. It's Mariam Rajavi. You can look it up. They like
Yeah,
Giuliani and John Bolton and all these people. But that's to say that Serbia's contemporary situation is really a question of its own identity and of its future. And of course, we know what's happened with Dodik now in Bosnia Herzegovina, with the court cases and everything that's transpiring. Really, my personal belief, and having been there and having met with Vulin and many others while I was in Serbia, is after the special military operation is over, I believe that war will again emerge in the Balkans again. Not that it's a desired, but it's a necessary condition for the Europeans to continue to achieve their aims. And that's one of the big fears. So simultaneously, you have this minister speaking about, for example, the importance of putting sanctions if they get into Europe on Russia, and also about Kosovo. Also, you have Vucic saying that he needs to grow the army and sort of increase the military forces and capabilities. And at the same time, you have the SVR saying that Serbia is secretly selling weapons to the Ukrainians. So you have a complicated situation, which I find very close to the situation in Turkey, for example, where Erdogan tries to play Putin and the West against each other for his own benefit. The
yeah,
problem is that Turkey has 80 million people and a very strong economy, even though it has crisis now, it still has a bigger and stronger economy than Serbia. Serbia tries to play as if it's still Yugoslavia, but it doesn't have the same capabilities anymore. And that's a problem ultimately for the ruling class in Serbia to deal with. And of course, the ongoing protests and demonstrations and issues internally also create a terminal crisis for the Serbian leadership. What's the future in Serbia ultimately? You have some sides saying Europe, some sides saying Russia and sort of multipolar world. But ultimately, it's up to the Serbian people where it should go. But if Serbian people want to maintain their identity, their heritage, their culture, their traditions, I believe that they already know which side they should be on. Because the other side seeks to strip a nation of its identity, its values, its culture, and traditions, and to homogenize them into some sort of cyborg, some sort of like the big Borg of the European Union, where everything comes down as a diktat from Brussels, and you have lost sovereignty and your own will over everything from education to the rights to the political freedoms that you enjoy. So ultimately, that's the crisis that Serbia faces, and many other independent countries within Europe that are not yet part of the European integration process.
yeah. But we also have in European Union, we have Hungary,
For
we have
sure.
the rising of how can I call the traditional side.
Slovakia, right?
Slovakia also with Fico.
Yep.
We have countries that are fighting off that kind of Brussels pressure, but they are already inside of European Union, and people in you probably know. I know that you know the numbers that around 70% and higher Serbian population is against joining European Union. That's the highest number from beginning of the story, the fairy tale called European Union, Serbia inside of EU. But okay, we will get back to that. I just want to ask a question because I think that you were born in the United States, you finished schools there, the university and stuff. So you felt that kind of damage around you. You saw what it means, that kind of politics, and how does it influence how what kind of influence does it have on society? The thing that you described to me right now and to the viewers that as we are getting closer to Brussels, we are destroying our tradition, our heritage. We are canceling our culture. So, being that you are from United States, you probably know how does it look like to destroy a nation, for somebody to destroy its own nation.
Absolutely. I mean, part of the process and part of the ongoing issues are that the United States seeks to remake the world in its image, and it does so first with its own population. So, for example, my mom is Greek, and Greek Orthodox. My father is Iranian and Shia Muslim. And we tried to preserve much of our identity and our values and traditions in the US, right? I grew up in a very wonderful Orthodox community. I've written about my Greek community in Worcester, where I grew up. But you can see that over generations, we begin to lose our language, we begin to lose our traditions, we begin to become secularized, we begin to become modern, we begin to change everything for, as the Russians say, blue jeans and Pizza Hut. But that doesn't provide for the nourishment of a person and their community, right? It only makes us passive consumers, and it makes us as part of the sort of that wheel that the gerbil and mice go on, right? The rat race. It makes us only seek material things versus focusing on those things that are of tremendous value and historical importance to our community. So there's a very strong Serbian community in the United States, and I used to attend the Serbian Orthodox Church in San Diego, California. There's strong ethnic communities, but you see what ends up happening. United States targets specific communities. For example, Serbs were all guilty of genocide. Serbs were all, they paint with broad brushes, these groups, right? And then they try to slowly take away those values and traditions. And they do that by imposing that also to countries abroad. For example, under the Biden administration, all of this USAID, NED funding for LGBTQ education, abortion, so-called human rights, so-called historical accuracy, right? Fact finding, fact checking, news, critical news. And all of these things are used as soft weapons against countries who have their own identity. So, for example, if millions of Serbians go to the street and say, we don't want gay marriage, for example, because they don't have to have it, it's their culture, it's their tradition. What does the West say in the US? Oh, they are homophobic, transphobic, they are fascist, they were always like this, and they paint that in the brush. But when, for example, Greece passed gay marriage against the will of the Greek people, by the way, by a conservative party, which is mind-boggling. A conservative majority passed it. The European Union said, oh, how wonderful Greece is. And the US was, oh, this is so great. Greece is coming into the European fold. And of course, we see the result. More US military bases in Greece, closer cooperation with Israel. It was all part of the plan, right? So, growing up in the US, I faced a tremendous challenge to be what does it mean to be American? And also, what does it mean to be true to my roots and my identity and my heritage? And this is one of the big challenges that we face. So, countries like Russia, which seek to preserve their heritage, their traditions, their values, and to promote these values, are labeled fascist, totalitarian, reactionary, national Bolshevik, whatever it might be. But they are just doing what they want to do and what they've always done in that way, in that sense. They are trying to preserve some of the basic elements of their society that the West is trying to strip away from them. China, the same, right? We know this as the case. When people go with this language of human rights, it was actually Singapore's former prime minister, Lee Kuan Yew, who said, we have our own values and human rights. We have an Asian human rights. We have Confucian values. You cannot impose your values onto us. And that's not to say that there's some, universal moral relativism, but it's to say that countries want to pursue ultimately their own path of development and to maintain their own traditions and cultures, much like people in the West want to maintain their own identity and to preserve some of that heritage that they have. But there's enormous pressure from all aspects of the society to try to change and remake you. And that's one of the biggest issues with education in the West. That's one of the biggest issues with a lot of this influencer culture, because they're trying to make normal things that many communities find abnormal or unacceptable. And I think that in this sense, we have a profound crisis. And we have a crisis not only in the US, but around the world of identity and of values and of what it means to belong to certain communities. Except for, of course, Israel in the US because Israel is it's Israel first, not America first. But for those of us who come from communities that are not, Israeli or Jewish, we face a tremendous burden, especially, for those of us who come from parts of the world that have always been criticized or labeled backwards, reactionary, anything like that.
Yeah, the you just mentioned Israel, and I I have a question when it comes to that. It's a tough topic because a lot of bad things are going on in Palestine, and nobody seems to care, especially from the West. This is where I'm going to when it comes to the question. Uh, you talked about Serbs and Serbia being painted as the fascists, the killers, the warmongers. Also today we have West screaming in hysteria for 2 or 3 years when it comes to war and denazification in Ukraine, when it comes to special military operation of Russia in Ukraine. We have the West bleeding out their eyes and ears and screaming and shouting that has to stop, or Russia has to stop. Serbia is the terroristic nation, fascist. On the other side, we have mass killing, tens of thousands of people, more than 60,000 of people are dead, children and women in Gaza, in Palestine, and nobody is doing anything. On the other hand, they are sending in more weapons, and United Nations is like they lost its credibility. So how do you comment to that kind of hypocrisy when it comes to Gaza and when it comes to Ukraine, when it comes to all of the world?
Listen, for the West, they are very selective about their victims and who they support and who they don't support. And it's all based within their interests. For example, if it's in Africa, it has to be a certain population that they want to exploit, and they'll exploit the certain political crises and genocides or whatever it is to speak about that in order to advance their interests. The same is true, for example, in the history of especially the Balkans. And we know, for example, Srebrenica has become sort of a pillar in the West of everything that's wrong with Serbia and everything that's good about the dissolution of Yugoslavia. But in fact, the truth is not as they present it. And we know this to be the case. And we know this. And of course, they won't speak about the other side, that Serbia has hundreds of thousands of Muslims that live and are proud to be Serbs, that there were Serbian Muslims who fought in the army of Serbia and defended and became heroes and became martyrs for Serbia. Because it's not about, they tried to paint this situation because in this situation, the Muslims were good, but everywhere else in the world, the Muslims were bad.
Yeah,
And of course, this is done strategically. Whereas for Serbia, it wasn't a question about Islam as a religion. It was a question about separatism and the support of that separatism by external powers. And those external powers had an agenda in mind. But there are Muslims in Serbia, and when I was there, I met with many of them, and I met with heroes who participated in that war who were Muslim, and I was able to be introduced to them, and they were very proud to be Serbian. You don't have to only be Orthodox. You can be proud of Serbia's
yeah,
heritage and history and its flag and its culture and traditions, and also be Muslim. No problem. And so for me, this was very important because this ultimately cuts the narrative that is pushed. The same is true, of course, on the other side across the Eastern Mediterranean. Of course, this the ongoing genocide and this ongoing ethnic cleansing since 1948 doesn't only target Muslims, it targets Orthodox Christians as well. It targets Palestinian Orthodox Christians who go back to Byzantium. They go back to our heritage, you know? When the rulers of Serbia called themselves rulers of Serbs, Greeks, and Albanians, they were Palestinian Orthodox Christians, right? So for me, it's very hard to have to try to cut these narratives that are pushed so strongly from the West that somehow all of the people in Gaza are terrorists. How could they be? Children? Really? And this is the same language that the Nazis used for Jewish children, that they were also by birth, ontologically, their being, their DNA was corrupt. And I think that this hypocrisy is very much part of an ongoing agenda that the West seeks to impose on other countries and the world. And that agenda ultimately is, if our people do it, it's good. If the enemy does it, it's bad. And that's the sort of relativism that exists for the West, which ultimately discredits its own idea that it upholds human rights and democracy and values and ethics and morals, and it's the world's foremost humanitarian country or group of countries. It's not true because their weapons are being used to slaughter children. Their tools and technology are being used to starve them, to deprive them of water, to deprive them of internet and electricity and gas. So I think that we, and you can see this in the United Nations and other places. You can see, for example, when it comes to criticizing the West and specifically Israel for its policies, you see where the votes line up. And when, for example, they had the recent vote for Srebrenica and things like that, you saw also where the votes line up. So I think that, for us, we have a profound crisis. And we have a crisis over not only defending human life and defending the values that we stand for, but also we have a profound crisis in dealing with these belligerent powers, these rogue states like Israel, who will continue to advance their interests at the cost of a population that is indigenous to that land, that has been there for thousands of years, and of course, that is not homogenous. They're not only Muslim, they are atheists, they are Orthodox, they are Catholic, they are whatever they might be, right? And I think that until we understand that and until we fully recognize that, uh, we are going to be in this crisis. And until we do something to counteract that, there will be no solution that we have. You see, of course, the position of Russia and China and many other countries in the global south. And I think that they are powerful positions. But I think that ultimately we have to be more moral and more clear about what's going on there. It doesn't mean that we have to take a position on the political situation, but especially within the Palestinian leadership, that's for them to decide. But they have every right to resist the ongoing genocide and the ongoing ethnic cleansing, just like the people in the Donbass had every right to resist the imposition by the Ukrainian fascist forces to strip them of their language, their culture, their traditions, and to strip them of their land. They said, no more, no pasaran. I believe the same is true for the Palestinians. And I believe the same will be true for the Serbians who are left in Kosovo and Metohija who do not want to give up the fight, and anywhere else in the world where this is ongoing.
I hear you, but when it comes to Gaza, we can see that there is not much help for the Palestinians to defend themselves. In New Russia, in Donbass, Donetsk, people had more more power to resist the fascism of from Kiev. But when it comes to Gaza, it's pretty hard. And when you have Erdogan, who is playing on both sides, when you have a lots of Arab nations who don't want to, who don't consider what's happening in Gaza. I don't know what's the future for that land, but for sure that one thing is for sure that we need to talk about it and people need to hear about it. And here in Serbia, you have like it's pretty crazy when you see it. In Bosnia and in Herzegovina, in Sarajevo, for example, you didn't have any protest, maybe small protests with cars for support of Palestinians. But in Belgrade, Serbs are going into the streets with Palestinian flags, and Serbian Orthodox are going to the streets with Palestinian flags. So it's, you know, you, it's crazy. The things are changing. But one question that I have for you, because I also try to talk with Haz about it, but you're giving me like the more clear stand of view from your side. Uh, we, as me personally, and I know a lot of people are thinking like that. When cannot believe, I cannot personally believe. I'm happy to hear it, but I'm talking to you, and you are coming from a communist party of
Mhm.
America, and you're talking about traditionalism, heritage, a religion, and you're talking about it from a good point of view, because people, when they hear communism, they only hear, right, in 2025, they are hearing George Soros, they are hearing Greta Thunberg, they are hearing woke extremism. So please, can you just explain how did we come to that kind of position that right now the communists are more traditional than the right wingers, or the far left George Soros communists, the other part of the left side, if we can call it neoliberals and stuff. How did we come to that?
Listen, I think for us, especially, and also my transformation personally, I think that growing up in I have a partisan family as well. My grandparents fought in the partisan movement in Greece. And in Greece, it was different than, for example, in Russia and at that time in Soviet Union and also in Yugoslavia. Because the church for us, like the church in Serbia under Ottoman times, was a point of resistance and a place that you preserved your identity and we ultimately launched our revolutions from. So Serbia rebelled against Ottoman rule, Greece rebelled against Ottoman rule, and there were priests and monks with guns and muskets and everything fighting against the Ottomans, right? Just like there were priests who fought against the Nazis, especially in the communist liberation movement. So in that way, my grandparents had a fusion. They were understood themselves to be communist on the left. They fought for that, but they were also deeply orthodox, and they were able to find the connection because orthodoxy for them was a site for liberation struggle, was a site for revolution against oppression, much like the Shia now in much of the Middle East fighting against oppression, whether it be Israel or America or other countries. And so I think that we had a unique experience. So many of us in the American Communist Party understand that tradition, the tradition where, for example, we don't need to be antagonistic towards religion. I understand the historical nature of this and why it happened. For example, the church was very close to the Tsar and the boyars and the ruling elite during the imperial phase of Russia. And so many people were upset that the church was getting fat and not struggling for the people, although some were. And you see that throughout the history. Um, but I think that today, the communist history, and you know this very well from Yugoslavia as well, there was a promotion of good values, good traditions. There was peace, there was security, there was strength, there was honor, there was patriotism, there was the support for big families. For example, when you say you are about family values, for me, that means the state should help families. The state should provide resources. The state should strengthen the families. Because if a young couple cannot have the opportunity to have a house or an apartment, cannot have opportunity for good job, cannot have opportunity for transportation and for support, how can they have kids? And then you have eventually a demographic crisis where lots of young people are not having not only their houses and their well-being, but can have many children. And so it becomes a crisis, not only a crisis in the West, it's also a crisis in Russia and other countries. And so when we promote these values as communists, we are merely promoting what the communists supported. Remember that in Soviet times, there were medals for how many children you have. It was an honor, it was a patriotic duty. And so we believe that we, number one, want to strengthen families because strong families mean strong communities. Strong communities mean strong nation. Strong nation means independence, sovereignties, and your integrity, right? If you don't have a strong nation, you can fragment it, you can destroy it, you can have a coup d'etat, you can have regime change, you can have color revolution, right? On the other side, we believe that a lot of the hysteria that has gripped the left, since the 60s and 70s around the queer this, trans this, that all is created and artificial. Yes, of course, historically we can look at some communities but they were minorities and they were not the dominant norm. This has been pushed as an agenda, and the agenda is ultimately, I think, rooted in the medical industry and big pharma because it's billions of dollars for hormones, transition, whatever you might say. It's also big business for commerce because you buy new clothes, you buy new styles. Every day you can change who you are, right? You can change your styles and you can somehow change who you are. And this way, you are constantly in a cosplay. This kind of culture is very much pushed because it's a big business ultimately. And ultimately, you lose any semblance of communal identity. Why is this important? As a communist, we seek to create strong communities because strong communities mean resilient communities. If you fragment people and you have this rampant individualism, it means you don't have that commonality, right? When Serbians get together and they celebrate, for example, some patriotic day or a celebration or some victory by some professional athlete, they come together in unity and they are all Serbs. We are Serbs. We fly the flag. We understand what the symbols mean. But what the West wants to do is it wants to say, okay, you are Serbs, but you are Serbs by mere accident of birth. What you are is Mario and Chris and Georgie and Nikolai and whatever it might be. You are each an individual. Forget about this big community stuff. And you can redefine your individuality. And you don't need to participate in these outdated modes. You can participate in, music festivals and in big mall opportunities and shopping sprees and things like that. And that's what they're really pushing towards. That's the homogenization. The homogenization now is on social media and in the commercial space. It's no longer in the patriotic traditional space. So for us as communists, what do we believe? We believe that we need to reclaim much of the strength of the communist movement that was early in its history. And this was the strength that ultimately led to victory in the Great Patriotic War, that led to victory against the fascists and the Ustasha in Yugoslavia. Those people, let me ask you a question. If you had Yugoslav partisans today walking on the streets from a time machine, and they interacted with left-wing people today in Europe, how do you think they would react? I think they would think they are freaks.
Yeah, yeah,
You know? They
yeah.
would. It's just normal. They would think there's something is crazy, right? Wait a minute, these people are with us?
They would think that Nazis won.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
absolute degeneracy, right? So we believe that. We believe that. It's not that we are against progress or things. No, what we are saying is there are some things that we need to preserve and hold on to. We believe in big families. We believe in strong families. We believe in communities. We believe in strengthening those things. And we believe that socialism, and we can argue all day about what it looks like, but ultimately, I think we can all agree the state can do more to provide for its people because capitalism itself cannot fully do it. It can't. We know this to be true. That's why Russia is moving in another direction again. That's why Russia is starting to give money to families by the state, is giving money to more kids, is helping out, free education. Why? Because that's the only way that it can solve its crisis. China does the same, other countries do the same in the socialist world. And so I think that we have something to take back that we had that we can learn from. When you speak to older people in Serbia, they might not agree with everything from Yugoslavia, but they are nostalgic for the peace, for the security, for the strength, for the patriotism, and you know what? These countries didn't have issues with immigration. They didn't have issues. Many of these issues didn't exist. Why? Because many of the countries around the world were strong and people didn't have to immigrate as much. But when you started to overthrow these countries, when you overthrew Gaddafi and now Bashar Assad, when you overthrew all of these leaders, When you destroyed all of these countries, what did you have? Mass migration. But if you have strong leaders in strong countries and strong communities, many people won't leave. They will stay. I, for example, left for political reasons, but I liked where I was born. I liked the land. I learned it. I loved it. I wish some things were different. But ultimately, people only leave out of mostly necessity. And of course, if that necessity is artificial and is created and imposed for political agenda, then you have the crisis that we are in today, right? And so I think that that's the root. And that's why we as communists, we are definitely on the traditional side. And that's why people will label us Duginist or National Bolshevik or whatever. But we are true to communism. We are true to what Stalin would want because he wanted that. And that's why Stalin is going up everywhere now in Russia. People love him.
Yeah,
People, they
yeah,
don't,
yeah.
they love him. They say, this is a strong leader. Okay, he made some mistakes, but we won and we became strong and he took us to the space. He took us to the atomic bomb from nothing, from serfs, from potatoes, from famine. He took us to space. That's leadership. And that was a strong country. People want that again here.
Yeah, people here also like people are searching because when we see all of us, when we see where we are living today and how the world is looking and the wars and the social problems and everything that's happening, I don't see anybody in the world promoting unity. You know, you can find a small group of countries that are uniting, but you only have the separatism like blooming around the world. Like everything is about independence. I'm going to be an independent from this. I'm going to be an independent from this kind of country. I don't need this kind. Nobody. Where Che Guevara disappeared? Where did it disappear the idea of unity? That
Mhm.
for me that's scary.
Yeah, of course. I agree with you 100%.
And it's I can't wait, but we can feel that somebody is promoting the unity. We see in Russia that you have the when it comes to the military parade, you see the all types of Russian army from the monarchy to the partisans and everything. So Putin did something that I think nobody did. He combined everything good from the best,
Yeah,
and
of course.
he made Russia today. So it's possible to do it. It's really it's easy to do it, but you just need to give the respect to the people into the history and nothing like I'm proud of all of the history from Serbia, since also from the fighting with Turks through Gavrilo Princip, through the fighting against Nazis. So combine that kind of stuff, and you can have your country united. People are not going to fight amongst each other. I'm Chetnik, I'm partisan. So it's but you have a hard task, man. You guys are having a really the hard times. You need to say to the people, you need to be so patient because a lot of time will pass before people around the world get that idea inside their heads, because it's hard. The decades of funding the projects, the countries, the schools, the education, where they told us about that was bad thing, like living together in the community. That's bad, man. Be an individualist, like do everything yourself. But okay, I'm going to stop talking because I have a question for you. When it comes to the United States, when it comes to the US, it's crazy. Trump was the most popular guy in Serbia before the elections. I think also in America, but I know in Serbia, like everybody was, Trump is going to, like he is going to do everything, like he's going to solve all of the problems in the world and also in Balkans. But today we came to the situation where we basically have Trump and his administration. Like one guy is searching for aliens, the other guy is like, like he's like he went from a story like I'm going to crush FBI buildings to find everything about Epstein, on the list. I'm going to find it. We're going to make it public. But what's going on in United States? What's currently going on United States people, is MAGA movement like dissolving? Or please give us an info about it.
I would say in one word, it's a shit show. What's going on for sure. The main issue is that Trump promised a lot and has gone back on most of those promises. So on the first side, he said America first. Well, now it's Israel first because we're doing everything for Israel and we're not, seeking the stability and the strength of America. United States launched military operations against Iran, a sovereign country, a declaration of war. We bombed their nuclear facilities. This is not a president who said, "Oh, I'm a warmonger." He said, "I'm a peace man, end the wars, no more new wars, no more regime change wars." And what does he do? He sends the B-2 bombers to go bomb a country's nuclear facilities. And you know what's funny in the recent movie Top Gun Maverick, that's exactly what Hollywood showed before Trump became president would happen in a possible scenario. And he did it. Like it's a movie, like everything Hollywood does, or like they joke about The Simpsons, just comes true. So on one side, we have a president who said no war, no more wars, and has become a warmonger and is supporting all of these wars. For example, he said, "I'm going to end Ukraine and Russia in 24 hours and have peace." What is he doing? Arming Kiev, funding Kiev. And even the Russians were still nostalgic and rosy eyes. Oh, Trump's going to have some peace. Of course, I said, remember, it was Trump who was already president for 4 years, who gave weapons to Ukrainian army and worked with them in joint NATO operations to kill people in the Donbass. And you and I have both been to the Donbass. I've been twice, and I've seen on the ground the reality. And I tell you, Trump is no friend to Russia, and and there's a lot of blood on his hand of innocent civilians in Donbass, in Crimea, and in Russia. So he said that he would do that. He didn't. The trade war, okay, he said that he wanted to strengthen America. So we knew that this was coming, but it has been all over the place. It has been quite just crazy what he's trying to do. Of course, he's saying that we're getting all this money. I haven't seen any money. If somebody can send it to my bank account who's listening, I'd appreciate that. Uh, Also, we have, of course, Trump said, "I'm going to release the files for Epstein, JFK, RFK, you name it, anything that's secret, I'm going to release it." And what happened? The opposite. We have nothing released. Trump's name is on the list. And of course, as you know, I found the second Epstein Black Book. I've been part of the investigation for a long time. And Trump is in both of Epstein's phone books, which are about 10 years apart. Trump was a very close confidant. Trump met Melania Trump Melania through Epstein. So there's a lot of stories here. There's a lot of history here. He hasn't done that. And of course, he's rounding up all of these, immigrants and things like that. I'm not saying that we don't believe in a strong border. Every country should have a strong border and a strong policy. But the way, like for me, as a person who's faithful, as a person who went to Orthodox seminary, I cannot tolerate separating families from children. I cannot. I'm a family man, ultimately. I have children. I cannot understand how we can do this in the name of religion, in the name of the nation, but they are doing it. And I just got back from Venezuela, where children are slowly being brought back to be reunited with their parents. But for me, a 2-year-old being separated from their parent is traumatic. You don't have to be a woke person or a leftist or anything. You can be the most staunch Orthodox traditionalist and live in a monastery and still believe that it's wrong because it's not right to do that. We had this situation in the Bible of Herod who killed and massacred the innocents. We don't want any blood of the innocents. We don't want trauma for the innocents. That's why we condemn what's going on also in Gaza and in Donbass and everywhere else where they are killing the youth and the innocent. So for me, there's a lot of crises that are ongoing. Of course, Trump will say, okay, I banned men and women's sports. Okay, good. But we want to see an end of the wars. We want to see an end of the sanctions. We want to see an end of the aggression. We want to see an end of the belligerence and of the support for some of these regimes that we don't like. For example, why should we give Israel billions of dollars a year? Give it to American people. They are
Sure.
starving, they are hungry, they are homeless, right? They don't do that. So there's a huge problem. MAGA is splitting now. Of course, now you hear some people saying woke MAGA or sort of the MAGA extremists versus the MAGA that are still with Trump. But MAGA is splitting, and you see the split in people like Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, even Steve Bannon on some issues. So there
Elon
is
Musk.
some
Yeah, yeah,
split.
yeah.
Elon Musk, of course, Elon Musk. So you see some splits, especially around Epstein, Israel, and the war on Iran. You see many of these situations. Of course, what's going on in Russia, Ukraine. There's a huge divergence. Also, Marjorie Taylor Greene has been very outspoken, right? So I think that we are experiencing a fragmentation here, and Trump himself recognizes it that the MAGA wing is starting to get angry with Israel, is starting to get frustrated with Israel, is starting to move away from Israel, and that's just a fact. It's a fact, and so MAGA is in a crisis, and I think that Trump is in a crisis, and until they solve a lot of these issues, until they really put America first, MAGA will continue to go into terminal decline about this.
Can you please tell me um, how involved Israel is in, because I see it on social networks. Like, and you said it like two or three times, Israel first. How is it possible that Israel is so much involved in decisions of the White House? They told us all the time, like those conspiracy theorists, no, but Israel is not behind the Hollywood. Israel is not behind Washington, but we can see it clearly right now. Like, how did it come to it? How did it come to it?
It's been a long time coming. It's been many decades in the process and in formation. But listen, there's no doubt that the Israeli lobby is very, very rich, and they use that money to buy influence. There's no doubt about it. On one side, you have a powerful Israel lobby, AIPAC. Also, John Mersheimer has written a great book called The Israel Lobby with a co-author about this situation. Um, there's tremendous money being spent. We remember Sheldon Adelson, now his wife Miriam Adelson, have given Trump over $200 million. $200 million. Not 2 million, not 20 million, $200 million. That's one. That's one person who's Jewish and supports Israel to the hilt. I don't even know if they have dual citizenship. They might be also a citizen of Israel, but $200 million from one person. Imagine what the whole lobby has. So they promote their interests, they buy their influence, they train the military, our military, the US military in Israel. They train the US police force in Israel. They bring lobbyists, they bring politicians, they bring academics. They spend a lot of money on soft power. They do this throughout the U.S. and its political establishment, and they spend money creating this artificial idea of Judeo-Christianity, that there's somehow a Jewish-Christian bond. As an Orthodox Christian, there isn't. There isn't. It ended, right? After Christ was crucified and they chose Barabbas over Christ, the early church understood that there was a split now. That's why, for example, Christians don't get circumcised. Christians don't have to follow Mosaic law. Christians don't have to follow any of those rules because Christians now, the church is the new Israel. Israel no longer is chosen. Christ has come and fulfilled that. But you have evangelical Christians saying that, oh, if you bless Israel, you will be blessed. Yeah, in the Old Testament, they have completely left out the entire history of the New Testament and the early church, right?
Yeah.
So I think that we have a situation now where there's been a lot of Christian purchase into Israel. For example, I'm Orthodox Christian, right? And go to and grew up in this community, went to seminary. When I went to visit in Jerusalem, the Patriarchate, and went to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, I didn't go to the Wailing Wall. Why would I go to the Wailing Wall? It's for Jews. They go there. No problem. They can go there. But I went to my church, Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where the miracle of the fire happens, where Christ was beaten and tortured in the praetorium and then came there and was crucified and buried. That's where it happened. So why would I have to go to the wall?
Yeah.
But you see, everybody goes to the wall. And they say we are Christians. I said, how can you be Christian? Go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That's where it all happened. That's the holiest site. Even Russia built a monastery called New Jerusalem Monastery, an exact replica of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, because it's so important for us as Orthodox Christians. But of course, now they say somehow Israel today is the continuation of biblical Israel. I'm sorry, but Christ came. We don't need biblical Israel anymore. We are Israel now. We
Yeah,
are
we
the
have. Yeah, we have all the politicians around the world. Like when they come to power, like we all have their photographs on the Wailing Wall, but nobody's taking pictures in a Church of Holy Sepulchre. So it's like pretty
it's
crazy. Like,
it's crazy. Like when my grandparents went on pilgrimage
yeah,
to Jerusalem, I remember they came back and they had a beautiful photo with Patriarch at that time. And they had the beautiful certificate for having completed the pilgrimage, which you get from the Patriarch with the signature and your name. And I got that as well. And that was the most meaningful thing. That's what I went for. I
yeah,
didn't go see a wall. The wall means nothing to me. The temple is over. Christ came. We have a whole new covenant, right? But
yeah.
but my problem is that the Christians in America and now Christians in Europe, they are Christian Zionism is completely antithetical to real Christianity. It's an invention, it's artificial, and it's weaponized to buy Christian purchase for Israel. But I have no Christian purchase for Israel. And of course, we know the largest landowner besides Israelis is the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate. Even the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, is built on Greek Orthodox land that's leased. So they're also trying to strip the Orthodox Church of its power. And this is an ongoing problem and situation. So for me, ultimately, I think that the crisis that we face is one that affects Christians and others. But ultimately, it's a deeply political and economic one because the lobby is so powerful, is so strong. You even had in the Obama administration, Netanyahu came to America and didn't even meet the president. Can you imagine the president of another country coming to your country and doesn't even meet with you? He goes to Congress and gives a speech. It's unbelievable. It's shocking. No other president. Could you imagine Xi Jinping going to Russia and speaking to the Duma or the Federation Council and not seeing Putin? I can't
Yeah,
imagine
it's
that.
crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. It's
It's
crazy. It's
crazy.
crazy. Yeah, Chris, I'm not going to take any more of your time. I just want to conclude. We are going to have so much time to talk. Uh, we are going to meet for sure in the future, somewhere in the world. Maybe here in Serbia, maybe somewhere else in a new or free world. Like we are all involved in freeing the world from the demonic elite, as I call them. But can you please, for the end, can you share a message for Serbian population that are watching? Do you have some words for Serbs? Give us some motivation. We love it so much.
Of course. Listen, I mean, as a proud Greek, as somebody who sees Serbia as not only as a friendly nation, but as my brothers and sisters, as a fellow Orthodox nation, as a proud nation, as a historic nation, a nation of over a millennia of history. I believe that Serbians should come together, strengthen their country, strengthen their resolve. If you want my perspective, both Greece and Serbia should be allied 100% with Moscow. That's our historic legacy. That's where we belong. We belong in that orbit. We belong with the people who know us, who love us, who support us, who are with us in all aspects. And that's what I would say. I want a Serbia that is independent, that's able to reclaim Kosovo and Metohija, that's able to reclaim its rights, that's able to defend the Serbs, that's able to defend Serbian history, that's able to defend all of their rights against the West. The West wants to destroy Serbia. I believe it. Just like they are destroying now Greece. They want to destroy Serbia. They want to destroy your culture, your traditions, your heritage. Don't give up. Keep fighting. Keep fighting. Only unity can save the Serbs. I really believe this, right? Only together can we overcome them. And we have been through crisis before. It's not the first time. We resisted together the Ottomans. We resisted together the fascists. Let's resist together the demonic and satanic elite. Let's resist together the Europeans and the Americans. Let's fight for a strong country and a country where we can have all of us together and we can have our neighbors, be they Muslim, be they whoever, they can be with us under one flag, under one patriotic banner, and we can continue to fight for our families and our future. And that's what I want. And I believe in Serbia. I love Serbia. I believe that there is something unique about the Serbs, and I believe that it's worthy to cultivate that for the Serbs, for the Greeks, for the Russians, for all of us who continue to fight together for a new world order.
Okay, Chris, really, thank you very much for these words. Really, when it comes to this kind of times, we from Serbia really need to hear somebody, as I said at the beginning, we need to hear somebody from abroad with some 100% independent and objective point of view to tell us that we are on the right path right now. So, Chris, really, thank you for being my guest tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, for sure.